hiding, but you might see my shoulder occasionally.
I see. Okay, that's fair.
Okay, everybody, we're about to start. Get your seat on. The show's going to be awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Friedlander, and I'm your host tonight for Pasadena Photography Arts Open Show number 38. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Before we begin, I would like to recognize the Tongva and the Chumash, who are the native people of this land we call Los Angeles. Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, anti-Semitism, sexism. We need to love and support each other for who we are. And I'd like to send love and support out to the communities who continue to suffer around the world due to COVID-19 and the Delta variant. If you've been with us before, thank you for your support. If this is your first Open Show, welcome. Open Show is an international platform that provides emerging and established artists with an opportunity to present and discuss projects to a live audience. We have calls and submissions every other month. Please follow us on social media.
Yeah, I know.
To stay updated, there we have. An Emerge project, PPA is an Emerge project under the Fulcrum Arts. We are a not-for-profit, volunteer-based organization. We would like to thank this month's underwriter, Pasadena Arts League, for sponsoring this event. An organization or individual can sponsor a show. The magic number is $250. And we would love to put your name here. We have two programs, Open Show like this evening, and Forum, where we invite established arts professionals to share their knowledge and experience to the community. Please consider donating to keep our events free. I want to thank those of you who have donated for this show. When you RSVP'd, your support is significant to us, and you automatically have been entered into our artwork raffle. It's not too late. You can still donate, enter throughout the show. There will be a link that you can do this with. That will be in the chat. Remember that you're muted. Questions, I'm happy to entertain questions while the artists are presenting. Raise your hand, put it in the chat, let us know. We'd like to keep it lively. The event is being recorded and will be on YouTube in about a week. Very excited to bring Douglas McCullough to Forum next month. He is the senior curator at UC Riverside Arts, California Museum of Photography, and he will be our August Forum guest speaker. We will have a nominal $5 admission fee for his presentation, but I'm telling you, it will be well worth it. And then we have a guest curator who is here tonight, Granville Carroll, who will co-host with Debbie Arlick, our advisor here, and we're very excited to have him in September for Open Show. Okay, welcome. Here we are. Our first presenter tonight, we are going to share Alfonso de Gregorio's work. Alfonso, we will first, I'm going to give you his bio and then we'll look at his work, and then I'm going to bring Alfonso to the stage. Alfonso de Gregorio is a European artist, globally recognized cybersecurity technologist and hacker. His artistic work spans image making, informatics, and lectures in engineering. In his practice, Alfonso examines the aesthetics and politics of surveillance, traumatic memory, and sustainability. Retained Reports, Alfonso's latest body of work, has premiered at the Belfast Photo Festival 2021, and I saw it. I actually met Alfonso in 2017 when we both participated in a photography workshop in Krakow, Poland. I'm really excited that his career has continued to flourish and that he is here today. I would like to now look at his work silently, and then I'll bring Alfonso to speak. Okay. So I forgot to mention, Alfonso is coming from Italy right now. He woke up at 2:30 in the morning to join us. So I'd like to welcome Alfonso right now to join us, and I will, where are you? There you go.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much, Ellen, for the kind invitation and the generous introduction. And thank you all for the opportunity to talk with you today about written reports by latest body work, where, as we are dealing today about alternative process and alternative realities, I question our problematic relationship with data originated from our own private human experience and invite us to imagine an alternative economic and social logic. Next slide, please. So I would like to start by offering you to ponder a few of the 1,000 questions photography can raise about the subject matter we are all awfully concerned about surveillance. When asymmetries of knowledge between citizen and the surveillance capitalist translate in asymmetries of power, what will be the consequences for the democracy? When we lose our private realm, how do we assert our moral autonomy? And when all our future behaviors are predicted, what does it mean to be human? I will leave this slide here for a while and take a step back. I'm a cybersecurity technologist by background who has turned visual artist at mid-career. In my professional life, I gained a deep domain knowledge about our interconnected possibility space and the resulting societal risks. Now that I have approached the arts as a way to distill my thoughts, the societal challenges related to my professional career form one of the main thematic areas for my youth. When it comes to my art practice, I can tell you that it's both process and research based. In particular, I utilize my cybersecurity background to conceive novel processes. Assess their ability to add to the storytelling, I match them to a subject matter that I have researched, and I develop the concept. The final project are the result of the combination of the design process and the concept baked by my craft. Next slide, please. In retail reports, I've turned the surveillance capitalism means of production against itself. What I've done is to train a generative adversarial network, a particular AI algorithm using unsupervised machine learning, to hallucinate the portraits of imaginary individuals based on an analysis of the images found in the public domain archive of Costi Caxinte, one of Romania's most prolific early 20th century photographers. So before getting to my imagery, let me show you a sample of the Caxinte archive, and it will become clear why I've picked up his images. Next slide, please. Many of these fragile glass plates have sustained damages over the years due to heat or moisture. The delicate silver gelatin emulsion has peeled off and the glass has cracked or splintered. So in a way, worn down by the time and elements, the portraits in the Caxinte photographic archive are, to me, allegories of the impermanence of human artifacts. Next slide, please. Their counterparts in written report, though, are like personal data in the hands of the surveillance industrial complex, permanent artifacts of computational processes and visual antithesis, which is to say that it's very hard for citizens to delete all their data, even if they resolve to stop sharing them. Let me try now to elaborate further the reason why the portraits in written reports are visual antithesis. I present these portraits as images retained on an electronic in-screen. These are chosen in lieu of traditional archival photo paper. You may be all reminded about what an antithesis is. An antithesis is a rhetorical device which uses words or phrases to convey the opposite sense of the real meanings. So, for example, if we, in a tongue-in-cheek, I say, "Hey man, you are such a funny guy," I'm using an antithesis. Visual antitheses do something very similar, but they do with images. In written report, the aesthetics of impermanence of the Xinte portraits is appropriated and reinvented to speak about the permanence of our behavioral surplus, to speak about the permanence of the data exhaust we leave on the internet at each and every interaction on the web. Next slide, please. Consider this. Electronic screen retain for years or even decades the contents impressed on their display, even after getting unplugged from their power sources. Here on the top right corner, you can see an embedded device I used to program the e-ink screen connected to it via a ribbon cable. Alexi, stop the screen sharing, please, now. I have here with me on video one of such screens. I have programmed this screen on December 2020, and this remains imprinted 1 semester later after getting unplugged from its power source. The portrait here imprinted was hallucinated by an AI, which is to say, I have data resulting from a computational process. Now, even though these visuals appropriate the same aesthetics of the impermanence found in Xinte archive, they are now permanent. Unplugging the display from its power source will not get them away. This is what they call a visual antithesis. So in a way, electronic in-screen reinforce the question raised in replay reports because they make visible how data, including our private and personal data, can become permanent. And it's both my open wish that this will invite you and the viewers to rethink the power relationship at play. I think I will stop here, and if there's time for it, I will be more than happy now to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, so Alfonso, what made you reach into the archives of the Romanian photographer Costica Asinte?
Well, to begin with, his body of work is very peculiar and acquired a particular meaning across time because he suffered from a conservation issues. Worked down by the time and elements, the images found in the Xinte archive has become, across the time, allegories of the impermanence of human artifacts because they suffer from poor conservation. And this struck me because in a way, it contrasts so sharply the reality we are experiencing nowadays on the internet, where our data is only apparently ephemeral in a way when it's not, because they can hang around forever. We have all the technical procedures put in place from an IT operation point of view to ensure that the data will survive us forever. So in a way, this appeared to be very peculiar to me.
And so the whole idea that we as photographers are always looking for ways that our photographs will be permanent and last forever, you're taking that and saying, really it is, but then there's this disintegration of data that's always happening, and that it's always going to live forever, even if it's not in its beautiful state or its original state. We're just going to have pieces of data that are there in the ethera forever.
You are absolutely correct in highlighting how photography is inherently about preserving an image. However, there is a power relationship at play here because there is a tension between the work done by a photographer that is editing and selecting and curating an images that is worth to be preserved in a way for the posterity, and images that escape our control, following the hands of third party, whose best interest is not to protect our data, our footprint on the web. And this data become permanent essentially forever. So the power relationships at play differ pretty dramatically because the economic incentives are misaligned, distorted, ineffectual, and disincentivize third parties from taking care of what becomes of our data. Even worse, our data become part of future products, of prediction products about our future behaviors, right? So we know by definition that all the surveillance industrial complex will do whatever it takes to ensure that data will not be lost in a way.
So we have a question from Bill Wishner, our fearless leader. Is your final visual product of natural deterioration of electronic images?
Well, this is a very interesting question because from a theoretical point of view, nobody fully explore the data retention of images imprinted on an electronic screen. We know for sure that they will last for years, possibly decades, and eventually decade, deteriorate in some way. But nobody, because it's not their intended use case to be preserving images, nobody really tested this use case from an experimental point of view. So I don't have a clear picture about what are the archival properties of electronic in-screen. They can last for decades though. And in a way, if I may, even if hypothetically speaking, one day they will decade and lose the image imprinted on their top, this would be nice because they would have made visible in a way how much time it takes to really lose control of our data and imprinted on an electronic device.
Right, right. It's a very interesting thought and a very interesting conversation. And it's a way to look at it in something physical, in a technological physicality, you know, because it's not a print, it's actually using technology that is going to keep evolving. And so, you know, it's a very interesting concept. Truly. Is there anybody else that would like to pose a question or has a thought on Alfonso's work? I find it fascinating. The whole idea, we talked a little bit in conversation about how you're a hacker and how you know all about like different countries and how they survey us and how they are always taking images, whether we know it or not, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the full picture today, you know, in the past, the history of photography is inherently an history that speaks about surveillance, because the first applications, the use case scenarios for photography spoke about the need to surveil, produce evidences, documents for the posterity. But there is something more pernicious here, because our full picture, in a sense, the real documentary form of the 21st century, it's about our data footprint on the web. This is the real evidence, the real X-ray of our persona. It is not any longer the images of ourselves or of our bodies that we can not provide the full picture. Sorry for the pun.
Well, we've also, Alfonso, let me interrupt you. We've also changed the whole idea of documentary, because now we as photographers, even though we've always done this, it's even more evident today that we are actually putting our bent on everything. So the way that the original photographers did things, even though they were still doing it through their lens, we today are way more personable in how we present things, because there's so many more of us out there. It's right. It's a pretty interesting. I need to ask you a question though by Rick, which I lost. Rick would like to know, how is it presented? As the digital ink screen itself, or then printed onto paper at some point?
No, actually, what I'm doing is to present the ink screen and encapsulating the ink screen in a custom-made perspex box. So at the end of the day, you have a perspex box hanging on the wall, like a traditional frame, a traditional print, encapsulating the ink screen with a ribbon cable hanging around free, and allowing the screen to be reprogrammed dynamically, if you will.
All right, well, that's amazing. We may have questions at the end, but I'd like to thank you so much, Alfonso, for waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh,
My
and
pleasure.
I want to
Thank you so much for having me.
We have a raffle print that Alfonso has donated for our art raffle. So this, if you've donated, this could be yours. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Ellen, for having me.
You're welcome. All right, I'm really excited because we have our next presenter up, Gwendolyn Davies. Gwendolyn Davies was born in San Antonio, Texas, and went on to spend most of her life moving every few years, and I can totally relate to that. In her research and art practice, she investigates the context of domestic space, self, and identity in relationship to contemporary culture. Davies graduated with a BFA in photography from Arizona State University's Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts, and Barrett, the Honors College in December 2015. She went on to receive her MFA from Rochester Institute of Technology in May of 2018. She is currently teaching photography and design courses at Monroe Community College and RIT as she continues to create, publish, and exhibit her own work. Her work is held in the William Jenkins Archive as part of the Northlight Gallery Permanent Collection in Phoenix, Arizona. She won the Visual Studies Workshop Award for her work in the Rochester Contemporary Art Center's 28th Annual Members Exhibition, and the People's Choice Award in the 2019 Ikwai Open Inspired Identity. I want to welcome you to look at Gwendolyn Ann Davies' work silently, and then we'll bring her forward. So I want to welcome Gwen from Rochester, New York, and she will share with us all about her project, Contact Traces.
Contact Traces is a collection of 450 daily lumen prints that I've made by placing more than 450 daily lumen prints that I've made by placing a piece of black and white darkroom paper in the window after it's come in contact with some sort of liquid. And then it's exposed in the window from whenever I put it in. At one point it was from sunrise until sunset, but it also is whenever I get out of bed, which is not always at sunrise. So this first slide is different from the others because it for me, this slide exists as one unit of the project and one piece of artwork. When New York State announced that they were closing everything down on March 16th, I had just moved into a new house. I transitioned from having multiple jobs, teaching in person, things like that. And all of a sudden I was in a house by myself, overwhelmed by having to transfer classes from multiple schools to online teaching, getting settled in a new house, and then just adjusting and figuring out what this COVID lockdown pandemic thing meant, which I think we're still kind of trying to figure out. So it took me almost 30 days before I started to create anything else. I could have continued projects that I had, but I also felt a little paralyzed and a little bit like I needed to create something that was more specific to where we found ourselves at this time. So with the exception of these first 30 prints, all the others exist as part of this whole body of work, but also as individual images tied directly to individual days. But as I made the project, it took me 30 days before I started making that part of the project. And as I started to make the project, as I got through it for a few weeks, I felt like it was really important to talk about those first 30 days where I wasn't making things and they felt a little bit lost, empty, things like that. So on the back of each of these 30 papers, I wrote the date for each of one of those days. And then I would drop one of these on the floor, and I left them in a pile until the full 30 days was done, and just left them on the floor for those 30 days. And they overlapped, they collected dust. I may have spilled a few drinks on them, things like that. And then I fixed them. So for me, these are the 30 days that weren't a part of the project, but they still are a part of the project. And we'll talk a little bit more about the way the project works as we move forward. And I do encourage anybody to post questions as we go, especially if you don't understand what I'm talking about with a lumen print or things like that. So this image, each image has a day tied to it, and I'm not somebody who counted days or kept track of time. But after spending a month alone, I think I really did start this project to keep track of time more than anything else. So this is day 34. That was April 18th of 2020. All of the images are 8x10s except for 3 notable exceptions. There's one 5x7 that I made before I realized that I kind of wanted all of them to match. The first image that I made as part of these is actually a 20x24 that is not fixed yet because I made it before I realized I didn't have a home studio that accommodated 20x24 inch prints. And then we'll look at it later. There's a diptych, and I'll explain why that one was a diptych. That was July 15th of 2020. I've been dabbling with lumen prints for a long time and really thinking about the way our environment, both physical and social, impacts our understanding of who we are and how we grow and change and develop and our identity develops. And so there's a really nice way that by putting these in the window every day, they create an abstract representation of each day of the pandemic and the way it's changing us forever. And that's why I felt like it was really important to include those first 30 days, because even though I wasn't creating an image, that was still impacting us in really powerful ways, maybe more so than later days. The title Contact Traces comes from the idea that these are a very indexical physical trace of the light and the liquid from each day, but it also references the contact tracing that has happened with the pandemic and things like that. I think the abstract nature of them is really important. because while we have all experienced this, and the pandemic and COVID-19 is a collective experience, it is different for each one of us, and there's not one face or one experience that matches it. So having the abstract images allows everybody to view it from the perspective of where they're at. This is the one diptych in the set. So that was July 15th of 2020, which was my birthday. I turned 40, and it was basically everything a birthday in 2020 could be. I was in quarantine. I paid my taxes because that was the new tax day. To pay my taxes, I had to use my unemployment check, and I lost a job. So it was everything 2020 could have been, but I wanted to make something really special for myself. So that is why this day is a diptych.
I have to ask you, Gwen, how did you do this one?
This one, instead of immediately putting it in the window, I showered early in the morning and I just dropped it on the floor of the bathroom and I stepped on it. Throughout the project, and actually even before I started making prints, I did some daily observational writing, and this one was day 150, which was August 12th of 2020, and that was my first COVID test day. And I got the COVID test so I could go back, be cleared to go back on campus for the semester for my teaching time. But the reflective writing that I wrote was reflecting on comparisons, and they're very loose and abstract, but the comparisons between my experiences with meningitis outbreak as a teen, when everybody had to go line up and get their meningitis vaccine, and then also adjustments we had to make during the H1N1 outbreak to teaching and teen camps and things like that, and teaching students a new way to interact, and the way those things carried on. Like the meningitis, well into my 20s, I would not share drinks or food with other people because that was such a big part of not getting meningitis. And so there were some reflections there.
What in the process of the lumens has created like the different colors and the different tonalities and just the different, you know, there's just different pictures that you're creating here, and what is making that happen?
Some of it is how I may have applied the liquid. Any liquid that comes in contact with it and changes the pH of the paper is what starts that change and affects how it changed. I've used a variety of papers, many of them expired, some of them brand new. I've gone through many boxes of paper. So each paper has a different tonal variation or color range to it. And then depending on what liquid I used, whether it was hot water or cold water, or some of them have wine on them, some of them have beer on them, some of them have like my morning coffee. Some of them have been rained on for a while. I would take them off the window when I went for my walk and take them outside and then bring them back in and put them back in the window for the day. In order to make 450, you have to get creative about how you're applying the liquids. This one, I actually reapplied liquid midday. This was another COVID test day, and it was the first time I double masked to go anywhere. That I didn't even realize, it was so early that I didn't even really realize that it was something we were doing, and I went to the test and they made us put 2 masks on. So when I got home, I laid that second mask across it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Roberta wants to know if you have thoughts about creating a book and with the writings at some point.
I absolutely, that's a great question. And yeah, I absolutely foresee it having the writing incorporated into it. I've started editing that. It takes a lot of time to piece through that and edit that and figure out what to keep and take. And I definitely think that probably the writings, I almost think that if it was an exhibition, it would be a combination of written words incorporated with the image, but maybe even like a soundtrack in the gallery that read, where I read some of the passages and you heard them rather than reading them. And I've always envisioned it as a book. The problem is we're coming up on 500 images in a couple days, and that is so many images to put into a book. And so, yeah, initially I thought I'd do it for 2 weeks and it would be a nice little COVID project. And then we came up on a month, and then it was 100 days. And even at 100 or 200, I was like, this would be a nice little book. At 500, I don't know if it needs to be multiple books or just a really big book. I think there's something to the massive amount of prints.
Right. It has weight to it.
Yeah.
So when Jill would like to ask a question, Jill, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay.
Let's see, ask to unmute.
Hi. I have a question. Was there ever a day that you woke up and you were like, I don't want to do this today? Because we know how the pandemic kind of brought us, some of us, you know, it was hard days after, you know, we thought, oh, it's a few months or whatever. And then as it went on and on, was there ever a day where you're just like, I'm not doing this anymore?
Initially, and for quite a while, like it was a reason to get up, to put these out, to see what they look like at the end of the day. But it is part of my routine. For a little while, I was making some extra ones, and that got to be too much. There probably were a few days where I didn't want to get up, or I would have stayed in bed longer because it was more like that was the task that was getting me out of bed. I don't know if there was a day where I didn't want to do one image, but there were definitely times where the project felt overwhelming, and I often question how much longer it goes on. But we still see every day that COVID's still impacting our lives and the way we interact with the world and the decisions that we make almost daily.
So Gwen, this leads us to this photograph right here that you shared with me. Was a very interesting struggle that you had, and I think it warrants you discussing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So initially when I started, I just assumed that at some point I would miss a day. I maybe would forget. I might take the picture off the window and lose it. It might fall off the window. If I took it outside, it might blow away. I assumed something would happen to where I would lose an image. And eventually I got used to that, and I decided it wasn't going to happen. And this image was day 430, or year 2, day 65, which was May 19th, 2021. Didn't even think about it. It was a new type of paper. I think I only had 2 or 3 pieces of this. It was given to me. Stuck the image to the window. I was on Zoom when the sun set. I went over while I was talking to my friend, and I went to peel it off, and it was not coming off the window. Like, it just started ripping. I'd had a few where pieces had ripped. If you go to my website, you'll see a few here and there. But usually I got them off with no problem. And all of a sudden I had this print I couldn't get off the window. But it was also day 430, and I was like, I'm not going to lose day 430. This can't be the one that I lose. So I think I spent about 20 minutes with my friend on Zoom encouraging me, scraping this off with the flat edge of a box cutter blade and peeling it off the window. But I think it's really significant and interesting because Jill brought up the idea of getting tired and getting stuck, and that idea, and then just some days, and especially this whole process, leaves us a little worn out and tired and tattered, but it's also changing our character and building us into something new.
Right. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Let's see. Are there other questions people would like to ask? Oh, thank you, Debbie. The abstract representation and mutationality correlates with the many unknowns of the pandemic. Can you comment on the indexica a bit more as it relates to the project?
Absolutely. So indexicality is this idea that what is in front of the camera, what is creating the image, was there and did happen. And so these are a very direct indexical trace of each day. And they really do, there's no way I can know in the morning what they're going to look like at the end of the day, just like we don't know what the end of the day is going to look like. We don't know what the next week or the next month is really going to look like. And so they're this really beautiful, direct image that's abstract and subtle, and it's tied directly to the time and the date that it was made. And no two are the same. I can't reproduce it no matter how hard I try. Some of them I'd love to reproduce. Some of them I don't think I would go back and try again. And I think there's also, I just forgot what I was going to say. But
That's okay. It's just that you're continuing on this journey, basically.
Yeah.
You are. And that's a lovely way to wrap it up. And you kindly have donated print to the art, and you're going to show it now to encourage anybody that hasn't yet contribute, made a donation. This could be your photograph.
Yeah, and this is the original. It's 8 by 10. This was one of the side images I made, so it's not part of the main project, but it was made on August 8th of 2020. And I will say, like much of the pandemic, the true beauty of these can only be experienced holding it in your hand in person. Granville is one of the few people in the world who can attest to that with full knowledge. But so there's something really beautiful about that, and I think that suits the pandemic too, this idea that I'm making something that can only be experienced up close and in person, and yet there's so very few people in the world who can do that right now.
Yeah, beautiful, beautifully said. Thank you so much. And at the end, if there's other questions for you, Gwen, we will share them then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right. Next up is Karen Amy Finkel Fishof. Karen was born in the Bronx, New York. She attended Syracuse University, go upstate New York. I'm from Utica. She received a BFA in painting. She studied a year abroad at St. Martin's School of Art, London, UK, where she first started creating photograms under the same professors as Gilbert and George, and showing her work in New York. Karen is active in the Los Angeles art scene, exhibiting frequently and pushing the boundaries of conventional black and white photography, producing large-scale, life-size, one-of-a-kind photograms, exploring themes of parenting, politics, and the intersection of gender and religion, confronting stereotypes and moving between the secular and the sacred. The work engages the viewer to explore the definition of photography, as well as examining their pre-existing ideas of the various content. I'm going to share with you Karen's work right now, and then I'll bring her to share her story. Great. I'd like to welcome Karen right now to share her process and tell us all about these photographs. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, everyone. First, I just want to say thank you to the Pasadena Photography Arts and Ellen for just creating this space for these conversations and presentations and for including me in it. I'm very honored to be here.
We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. So what we are looking at here, my work kind of, it chronicles my life over time. So it's almost like a journaling of what's happening around me. So this was made when I was in college and took my first photography class. And they had us make a photogram just to show us how whatever's blocking the paper stays white. And so I chose the objects that were in my realm, which was my makeup bag, and chose shapes that I thought would be, you know, had interesting silhouettes, and to see how they would come out in this process. So this was more of like just learning and experimenting. And this one is where I started to realize I could tell a story with this process. So it says killing time on there. And also this was like a clear swatch watch and a clear plastic gun. So I was experimenting with how the light reflected through the objects, and plus how one object could kind of shoot something over to another object and create this interaction and tell a story.
And how big were the first two photographs?
These are 11 by 17s.
Right. That's very important.
Yes. So now, boom, we jump to huge. This is 2 sheets of roll paper that are 10 feet across and 3.5 feet each high. And now I'm in London. I'm on my semester abroad. And I'm talking about how, and by the way, I want to mention something important is that I was a painting major and I took photography as an elective and then kind of ran with that. But I took my painterly style into this with like spontaneity and kind of flowing edges where I would let the chemistry kind of run like paint would run on a canvas. Here we are. This is the first one where I decided I needed to make a giant negative. So I took clear Mylar and painted the Absolute bottle on it. And also the text at the bottom are sticky letters on top of the clear Mylar that I laid across. And just finding objects with cool silhouettes and also how a human and an object kind of interact.
And also a little spoof on the ad campaign.
And a big time. I mean, you know, at that, this was the highlight of when it was like Andy Warhol and everybody doing these Absolute ads. And, you know, being a young kind of cocky art student, I was like, I'm in that league, so I'm going to make my own ad. So there you go.
Love
Now
it.
we jump more of a fast forward into this Women's March. And it was very kind of, I had a lot of thoughts floating around it as to what were we marching for? And I realized everyone was coming maybe with their own agenda, like what did that mean to them, being a woman or supporting a woman's issue. So that's why it's what is my real issue. When in the 70s, I had gone to Central Park to the No Nukes rally, and everyone was there for one, you know, precise goal, one reason. And this was much more open. So I was exploring what would be in the minds of the women going there, and those are in the little signs at the bottom. So the figure in the middle is a real person, and the figures at the bottom are cut paper that I laid over and as you can see the outline, these are now I'm using 16 by 20 sheets of photo paper, kind of mosaicked together for the exposure. And all of these are done on the floor. So my husband is in the music business. I'm a big music fan. That's how someone introduced us. And so we have a lot of guitars in our house, and those are all little guitar picks around the words. And I just thought they were interesting shapes and a fun energy. I have 7 grandchildren and 1 on the way. So this is kind of, and they all live on my block. So they're in my refrigerator. I spent a lot of time with them. They're over my house. And so this is like an ode to innocence, where the girl is kind of shooting the one heart into this shape, and little hearts are flurrying out onto the boy on the other side. And this is also the same, my same two of the grandchildren. And this is kind of like a story of they're on the Ferris wheel at the Santa Monica Pier, and it's called Moonshot. And it's like a first date, and he's wondering nervously, should I go for it? And he goes to grab her hand. So that's his moonshot, and she's pointing at the moon, like there's the literal moon and then the moonshot chant. These were a series of experiments of putting the smaller objects under larger objects and different exposures, but I love the way they came out in a group, and I called it Flowers and Rings. And then I thought it's kind of sort of like a wedding type thing where you have your bouquet and you get your ring. So that's
Pretty.
More abstract series. I have 2 pet bunny rabbits. So if you look closely in each column, there is, and this is the first one where I didn't use humans, but I used animals. There's a bunny rabbit, and those are carrots and other greeneries that the bunnies eat. So this was also, I do some other work which is kind of modular because these photograms are very large and hard to transport. So this was kind of in pieces, but then put together. It's huge. So it incorporates the text horizontally and the visuals vertically. This is my son, and he's such a typical boy with all of his boy toys. And a way I make this is to figure, I lay out the photo paper on the floor and I stage the person. So I'm walking around with my socks, so I'm not ruining the photo paper, and positioning. So imagine he's laying like that for a while I'm moving every little Lego. And, there's a hockey stick on the right and like a snake on the bottom, and castle pieces, and, so.
It's a lovely portrait of a particular time in his life.
Exactly. Thank you. And this is a self-portrait. It is me. And I implanted a selfie stick within myself. And I painted that on top. So it's a mixed media. This one is I'm still influenced by a lot of music. This is a song by a guy named Matisyahu, and I incorporated his lyrics in. And on the bottom is, I am here for a reason. That's one of the lyrics. And then it's on the left, it's all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more war, and our children will play. So this is kind of like a hopeful future of, the utopia when war ends and world peace.
Yeah, yes, it can't come soon enough.
Can't come soon enough. This is when my son turned bar mitzvah, and he became part of the teen minyan at the synagogue. So they have an adult leader who's like the figure on the right, and these like 10 boys, and I've numbered them, that make up the minyan on the left, and the Hebrew letters flowing out of the book. And so this was just another thing that I didn't grow up religious. So all of these things were like a totally new experience to me that I'm learning, as I go. This was when the movie Wonder Woman came out, and she was considered the woman of valor with physical strength, and I wanted to show that spiritual strength is also a woman of valor. And there's really 3 things so I didn't grow up religious, and I became religious before I got married. And there are 3 things a woman is supposed to do, and one of them is light the candles on for the Sabbath. So to me, that's what this one represents.
And there were two other things that are really important that you shared with me.
Oh, the two other things is baking bread for the Sabbath, making the challah bread. And the other is something called keeping the laws of family purity.
Beautiful.
And the bottom here says Ashes Chayil, which is a song that is sung on Friday night which means woman of valor. This is another new idea that I got introduced to when I became religious, is the way I was dressing and the way I dress now. And that I was seeing on social media a lot of the influencers dressing in a way I didn't want my daughter to emulate. So I was putting a message out there that maybe that's something other people should be thinking about also, is to kind of reassess how you dress. That it makes a statement of your own, how you feel about yourself. That the way it was presented to me is that if you had something so precious like a diamond, you would wrap it in a satin bag, in a velvet box, you'd keep it in a safe. So something so precious should be wrapped in something glorious.
I like that.
And this is another practice that I've learned, which is people of the opposite sex do not touch. So unless it's your husband or a close family member. And it really became pertinent when COVID started, because now nobody's shaking hands, nobody's touching. So it says Shomer Negia, which means this practice. And I felt like this was an ancient wisdom that kind of came to life in everyday practice by this whole COVID thing brought around. So kind of celebrating that. This is another practice of women not singing in front of men. Women can sing in front of each other or in groups where you don't hear one woman in particular standing out because it's seductive. So this is where I made a photogram on film of myself. You can see it inside my body, so it's a double exposure. So first I made that one. It's a silhouette with my mouth open singing, and that's inside my body of a photogram of myself with my mouth closed. So when I'm hearing the people singing, I'm belting it out on the inside, but on the outside you don't see it. Okay, so here's one talking about the baking of the bread. And this, everybody's questioning with COVID, well, why am I here? So I thought about that, and this is what I want to do, is I want to fulfill the Torah's way of living. And there, in the song Ashes Chayil that we sing on Friday night, it are the words in English inside where it says, it's two women exchanging bread, is what you're seeing, but you don't know who's giving and who's receiving. And it says, she opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. So giving charity is very important, and doing it in an anonymous way so the receiver still feels very dignified. So here you don't know who's giving and who's receiving. And in the background is kind of the silhouette of the two tablets. And the words in Hebrew, Lahafrish hala min ha'isa, is what you say when you make your dough. You pull off a piece and you say that prayer before you put it into the oven, and that piece you burn. In the old days, that extra dough would have been given to the high priests, but today we don't have that, so we adjust to burn it.
Cool.
So that's all part of that process. And this is now coming out of COVID. We all need to, I was so stressed out, and I just need to do a little Zen meditation. And what I like about this piece is that the breathe is not just in the concept, but it's got a lot of open black space, whereas a lot of my other works are filled up with a lot of little pieces and objects. This is just the figure and the words. And it's also my daughter, by the way. And I just loved how her striped skirt that she was wearing just came out beautifully, in her hair, and the whole thing just has this beautiful vibe to it. And that's that piece. Now, this is showing my latest project. So I've been thinking so much about my journey, and I realized it doesn't just start with me. I come from a whole ancestry and the generations that came before me. So I have written the story of my family and of my husband's family and how we then come together. And it goes through, war, pogroms, suicide, death, murder, and then there's the triumphs, there's the survival, there's the loves, there's the losses. So within this story, I realized I needed to have visuals. And so I started to create a storyboard for this story. And this is the first piece of the storyboard with the first character. And when I see a piece in a museum, that's how I was looking at this. First, you look at the piece, and then you read the little thing on the wall next to it. So the last thing my father gave me is what it says in the piece. But if you went and looked at the title, it is Before He Was Killed by the Cossacks. So this is a true story that happened to my father's mother. And she was a little girl, and her father, it was her birthday, gave her a doll. And he went off to the synagogue and said, when I come back, we'll have breakfast. And while he was at the synagogue, the Cossacks charged in on horseback with swords, and they beheaded him in the synagogue. And my daughter is named after my grandmother that experienced this story, and she's the person in the picture.
I have to ask, Karen, is this new work you're developing as I believe it's a storyboard, right? And much of the newer work has a spirituality to it. Have you thought about putting it all together with the stories of your journey and spirituality through Judaism with the artwork, putting it together and telling that story?
Yes, exactly. So what I've realized in doing my research is that generations ago, my grandparents were religious. It got lost over time, and then coming to America. And now it kind of come full circle into my story and my journey. So it ties in with the whole generational story. And I'm very excited about this project. And I'm hoping to sell these storyboards to raise money to make this film or miniseries, and that's what I'm up to these days.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. Everybody enjoyed your presentation, and the work is amazing. Super happy you're here. Thank you. And if there are questions, we will. Oh, your print. She has donated a print, but she's got a screen, so it will look really funny. But she has donated one of her smaller photograms. And so we're really excited. So if you want to donate and be part of the art walk, the art raffle, that would be wonderful. So thank you very much. All right, we have our last presenter, and it is a film, In Tide and Time by Roberta Mangini Glisson. And I'd like to read a little intro and then we'll watch her film. Roberta is a California-based visual artist working in photography and video. A destination wedding photographer for 7 years, the global pandemic left Roberta with time to create and re-enter the world of fine art photography. Her work in both photography and video explores the lives and identities of women, from mythic goddesses and warriors to modern women and the institution of marriage. Her recent photographs and films have been selected for OpenShow San Diego, the Big Picture Colorado, 100 Heroines Film Festival in London, and Equal Lens #SheTakesOver campaign. Roberta studied art at Loyola Marymount University, UCLA, and the UCSD Extension. And now we will watch her lovely video.
faintly. I'll go. To take this head on. Soon I'll come around. Lost and never found. Waiting for my words. Seen but never heard. Buried underground. But I'll keep coming.
I'd like to welcome Roberta to speak about the work.
Thank you, Ellen. I feel so lucky to be welcomed into this really supportive and extremely talented community at Pasadena Photography Arts. It's been a fun week getting to know you all. I don't like to talk about myself, but Ellen has challenged me to be vulnerable tonight and to open up. And I suppose I can't effectively speak to this film without talking about myself. So here goes. So I've been a photographer and an artist really all my life. Had a strong interest in art as a kid, especially drawing and photography. It was like the dream career that I didn't dare to actually dream because it was unconventional, not expected of me. But despite that, I did get my bachelor's degree in art. I went on to work in various artistic fields that were more conventional, I guess you'd say. Worked in advertising and graphic design early on. I got married, left Los Angeles, continued my fine art studies and made some multimedia art, combining writing with photography and painting. I was in a few group shows early on and got to work on the set of Cremaster 3 at the Guggenheim. It was still like really trying to hold on to the dream, you know, but ultimately dropped all of that, stopped working altogether. When I became a mother, stayed home to take care of my 3 kids. I did all the things that one does to live like the conventional suburban life. About 10 years later, once all of my kids were in school, I started a wedding photography business. And after shooting weddings for 7 years, I felt inspired to make this story. So that's kind of all the things that led up to this little video. So coming home to a real life working marriage after being at a wedding all day, I thought a lot about the contrast between the wedding celebration of the day and the realities of being in a marriage and, you know, making that choice and doing the work every day. And I felt like I needed to tell the entire story. And so as the story developed in my head, I realized it was not just about marriage, but maybe more so about the identity loss that often happens to a woman within the confines of marriage and domestic life. Being a stay-at-home mom especially, and even sometimes just being a wife in the suburbs, can come with isolation and like a loss of identity, a certain amount of distance between yourself and your spouse sometimes, that who's still out in the world being productive and experiencing his own life and identity that's separate from the family. So I think I needed to explore all these feelings. I needed to explore like what happened to the person that I once was and find out if she's still there and if I can still do this thing. And I needed to make art again. And so I think in a way, I guess I made some art about needing to make art, and the setting was marriage. So I had this idea for like maybe around a year or so as I was shooting weddings, but I didn't know how to present the story. So I have experience telling stories through photography, but wasn't sure how to tell like a story with an arc within a single frame. Wasn't sure whether I wanted to make a series or a slideshow or a movie or video. It was 2019, and I was really inspired by a few things. First off, Mike Mills' short film, I Am Easy to Find, which is based on the Nationals album of the same name. This beautiful black and white film that follows a girl through her entire life. No dialogue, there's some narration, but mainly music driven. I also that year saw Ragnar Kjartansen's art films, The Visitors and Death is Everywhere. And again, they're very music driven, less narrative, more conceptual this time, but like insanely beautiful, super inspiring. And then in the fall of 2019, I was at a workshop in Ireland and was able to study under photographer Raphael Boyar, who shoots in this animated style. And I really was drawn to this. I thought it was very unique and fun. And I also feel like we kind of view the world these days through like GIFs and sound bites and all this kind of stuff that we see online all the time. So I liked the idea of telling a whole story in this medium. I also felt like this style was really perfect for this project that I had brewing in my head. So I decided to present it in a combination of slideshow and animated stills. Both of these were really reminiscent of the way that I viewed my own parents' marital history and their family stories. So as a kid, my dad would set up the screen in our living room and he would show the home movies that he shot with his 16mm camera with like the crank on the side. And we'd watch slideshows from our family vacations and early days of our family. And so this animated style really reminded me of that jittery, like sped up black and white footage from those old 16mm home movies. And then for the slideshow effect, I really liked this music that I chose by Low Roar because it reminded me of the sound of it in the beginning of that like clanking of the slides changing in the old carousel projector. So had a plan. It's March of 2020. And I recruited my friends, Allison and Brad Smith. And I chose Allison because she's a dancer. Not only was dance important, an important part of this piece, but I felt like being a performer, she could become this character for me. So I brought her a storyboard and we planned out the most effective way to shoot this as things were developing really fast with COVID. So we shot this like 2 days before the lockdown here, shot it in one afternoon and went into lockdown. And so I had this project, which was great because editing took forever. And I had this weird like gift of time, I guess. And I had, in the end, I had 655 frames in this final piece and all stitched together in Photoshop. And, I look at it now and I know it's like by no means perfectly executed, but I got it out there and it's like really opened the door to me to so many opportunities and this like dream vocation that I can come back to now and feel like I can own it again. So this project's been really special to me.
I have to say, the imperfection, which I can't see, is really important because there is no such thing as perfect.
For sure.
there, we are perfect, but we're perfect in our imperfection. And being a wedding photographer, you're there at people's moment of trying to create that perfect moment. And you have a lens because you're married with 3 children and you're making these beautiful, iconic photographs for these couples. Yet you're going home to the reality of what that really means. That push and pull had to have a big influence in creating this film.
Yeah, for sure. And an influence on the way I shoot weddings too. In fact, I have a wedding client who's getting married soon, who's Silver. She's in the chats. And I hope this doesn't scare her up a little bit, but at the same time, like, I think there's a depth to the wedding day now too, as well as appreciating all the different dynamics and the family dynamics that are happening that day, and knowing exactly what they are getting themselves into.
Right. And your film, what struck me is, especially with COVID and with our distance, and that people were locked down with a partner. And if you were alone, that was one way of dealing with it. But if you were locked down with a partner, that changed so much. You know, you had, like, that's all you saw. So that complexity, I don't know if anybody's ever had that before. So that when you were editing had to play a very important role, I'm sure.
Well, my husband was my sounding board for this, and he was my screening audience, and you know, the one I would go to for brainstorming. I was a little nervous, honestly, the night he and I went out. I'm like, all right, I have this idea. I want to make this thing, and thinking like, this might not go over well. And he was like, I totally get it. Totally get it.
I mean, and then putting it out there with it's very delicate, your foibles. You know, you're showing people having moments separated, but you bring them back together. So whatever demons they had, there's a resolution to them, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I know not always, but for us there is, and it's, I think that it doesn't get the celebration that like that easy wedding day got, you know?
Right. Well, we all know that the wedding day is never easy, but it is what it is. And I'm sure now that you've done this and now coming back into wedding season and people are, you know, excited, I would imagine that a little bit of reality might be really important to put in there.
For sure.
I don't know if anybody has any questions from the audience that would like to. They really love the work. They love the film. Wonderfully executed, Rollins is sharing. Have you considered offering to create a smaller version of this style for your wedding engagement clients?
That's a really good question. Actually, in the beginning, when I was thinking about this, and the workshop I was at was for wedding photographers. But everybody was like, this is really artistic wedding photography, unusual. And I think that's what I thought was like, maybe I move beyond the wedding day and create these stories. Like, I don't know if this is going to have any marketable sort of effect, but to be able to create a true story for somebody, something, you know, meaningful to them. Initially I thought, wow, that would be cool. That I would really enjoy that. I'm not sure how to market that one, but.
Okay, so I document a lot of my life and everything around me. Have you thought about turning the camera on yourself?
No.
And there you go. Turning on yourself and creating a project that actually may be more valuable long-term to your children and your family. Not more valuable, but a little bit more, as we said, vulnerable and imperfect. And it would take years to do. I mean, it would be very special.
Yeah, I really, even just like speaking like this is not in my comfort zone. And, you know, with like examining marriage, I kept motherhood completely off the table in terms of exposing any of that, because that feels very complicated and sacred and not my story partly to tell. And even though that was hugely affected, you know, this story, maybe even more so than marriage, but it just didn't, I don't know, I think I'm too private in that way.
Right, well, I have to share that Terry Rory loved everything about it. It's very creative and artistic. And Catherine Singer, the work and music communicated on many different levels, and loved the way it was edited. Beautiful. And Don Watson says, thank you for a wonderful evening. It was very evocative. So I want to thank you so much, Roberta. It was wonderful. And I want to bring everybody back out. Here we go. And thank everybody. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to pose to any of the guests? Just raise your hand and shout out loud. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us tonight at Pasadena Photography Arts. It was really, really wonderful getting to know you all. I want to thank Alfonso for coming in from Italy. Thank you for getting up at the wee hours of the morning. Thank you, Gwen, for coming from Rochester. I know it's late there. And my people in LA and Carlsbad, Roberta and Karen, thank you so much for joining us, and everybody else. Granville, we're really excited about you for OpenShow September with Debbie Arlick. Make sure you sign up. Okay. Hi, Larry.
And before you go, there's actually another call for an alternative process show. It's going to be linked in the chat. It's a juried show at the Photographers Eye Collective down in Escondido. And so if you are also a photographer who works in an alternative process style,
take a look.
We really encourage you to support them.
Oh my goodness, Donna Constantino is wonderful. So check out the Photographer's Eye. All right. So thank you all for joining. Loved having you here tonight. We'll see you next month for Forum with Douglas McCullough. Have a great night, everybody. Go you. No, it's fabulous.
Bye, everyone.